The story you're about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts about historical characters, events, or locations. Please sit back and listen as I narrate this story to you. In April 1935, the shark arm case occurred in Sydney, Australia. A series of shark attacks had terrorized the southeast coast that year, and the colossal fish were viewed as man-eaters. Koji Beach, once a thriving hotspot, was no longer attracting the same steady stream of visitors. Foot traffic in the area had decreased following the demolition of the nearby Koji Pier, which had housed a penny arcade and a 1,410-seat theater. Robert Hobson, the proprietor of Koji Aquarium, foresaw the public's desire while fishing with his son Ron off Sydney's Koji Beach in April 1935. A small shark he was reeling in drew a 14-foot, 1-ton tiger shark that became entangled in his fishing line 3 kilometers offshore. After bringing the monster to shore, he decided to make it the star of his Sydney attraction and charged visitors to marvel at the creature. The new exhibit proved to be exactly what the Koji Aquarium required. With the presence of a ferocious tiger shark on display, people suddenly had an exciting reason to visit the aquarium. The creature's popularity peaked on Anzac Day. The holiday is like Memorial Day in the United States, and it is observed on April 25 in both Australia and New Zealand. Many people went to the Koji Aquarium on their day off and made a beeline for the tiger shark tank. However, the 14-foot tiger shark at Sydney's Koji Aquarium was behaving strangely. It had lost the energy and appetite that it had displayed when it first arrived at the facility a week before, on April 17, 1935. It sluggishly moved around its 25 by 15-foot pool, bumping into the walls and sinking to the tank's floor where it swam as if something weighed it down. At around 5 p.m. on April 25, 1935, it revealed what that something was. The shark trashed its body and coughed up the contents of its stomach in a sudden burst of movement. When the foam settled, the aquarium's visitors noticed a partially digested human arm floating on the pool's surface. Aside from the arm, the shark also ejected a bird and a rat. When the disembodied arm was regurgitated by the aquarium resident, many assumed it was evidence of another deadly shark encounter. According to the coroner's report, the arm was not bitten off but was instead cleanly cut off with a knife. That meant the shark who threw up the remains was a bystander in the apparent murder. The arm was in good condition, and it bore a tattoo of 2 boxers. It wore a rope around its wrist. The shark had devoured the arm at least 8 days prior. Clearly, this was a murder case and not an accidental death. The fingerprints and tattoo on the severed arm were enough to identify the owner. The tattoo was on the victim's forearm and depicted 2 boxers facing each other, fists poised for a fight. A man named Edwin Smith recognized the tattoo description and told police that the arm might belong to his brother James. He'd gone missing a few weeks before. The police were able to obtain fingerprints from the hand and confirm that it did belong to James Smith. They were able to match the hand to Smith using a new forensic technique. He was a boxer and a construction worker. He was 40 years old. On April 8, 1935, his wife reported him missing. While shocking, the news that James Smith had been murdered and eaten by a shark was not completely unbelievable. The 45-year-old English-born Gladesville, Australia resident managed a local billiards bar and had a criminal and police informant history. Following a failed boxing career, he took odd jobs around Sydney, including running the billiard saloon and working for a boat building magnate and crime kingpin named Reginald Holmes. Reginald Holmes came from a long line of boat builders dating back to 1850. Reginald's father and grandfather had both been successful boat builders, and he had followed in their footsteps, running a thriving business in Lavender Bay building speedboats. His most profitable operations, on the other hand, were of a less than legal nature. He used his speedboats to coordinate cocaine drops from passing ships off the coast of Sydney, which he then sold in the city. He also worked insurance scams, including one in which he and a few other consorts purchased over-insured and sank the Pathfinder pleasure cruiser. James Smith was involved in all the schemes. He frequently drove the speedboats out to the heads, for drug pickups and was the Pathfinder's caretaker. Soon after, the pair teamed up with Patrick Brady, an ex-serviceman convicted of forgery. They began to forge checks from Holmes' wealthy clients for insignificant amounts, cashing them at both Holmes and Smith's businesses. Smith and Holmes quickly fell out over one of the scams, and Smith began blackmailing Holmes, knowing that his respectable status in Sydney made him an easy target. Smith understood Holmes stood to lose a lot of money. What he didn't realize was that this fact put his life in jeopardy. Holmes later discovered that Smith had reported one of the scams to the police as suspicious, and he was forced to pay for the boat. This resulted in a squabble between the two men, which was exacerbated when Smith allegedly began blackmailing Holmes. James Smith was last seen drinking with Patrick Brady at the Cecil Hotel in Cronulla on the night of April 7. They then went to a cottage that Brady had rented for them. When a disheveled-looking Brady later took a cab from his cottage to Holmes' house, Smith was nowhere to be found. The cottage's owner stated that a mattress and a tin trunk had gone missing. Brady was suspected of murdering James Smith and concealing his body in the tin trunk, according to the police. Perhaps one arm didn't fit, so he severed it and tied it to the trunk. He then threw the body into the sea, but a shark swallowed the arm. Even though there were two suspects, a motive and a severed arm, the case was far from over. Police still lacked the hard evidence required to make arrests in connection with Smith's disappearance. Instead, on May 16, 1935, they arrested Brady on forgery charges unrelated to the crime. The cops had to interrogate him for 6 hours before he admitted what they had already suspected. Reginald Holmes was the mastermind behind the plot. Holmes must have heard that the police were onto him because by the time the cops arrived at his house, he was on a speedboat in Sydney's harbor. He eluded his pursuers by imbibing from a bottle of liquor he had grabbed before fleeing. At one point, he came to a halt in front of a crowd of onlookers who had gathered to watch the chase. He then shot himself in the head and collapsed into the water. For a moment, it appeared that the case had reached a dead end, but Holmes miraculously survived. The bullet caused a non-fatal wound to his forehead, but he was able to drag himself back onto the boat. The cops finally apprehended Holmes after a dramatic chase, but extracting a confession from him would be just as difficult. He named Brady as Smith's murderer and portrayed himself as a victim of blackmail. Brady, according to his story, acted alone when he killed and dismembered Smith in his Talombi Street cottage. He described how Holmes had murdered Smith, dismembered his body, and tossed the pieces into Ganamata Bay. In the 1920s and the 1930s, such an ocean burial was known as Sydney's send-off because the vast uncharted ocean and its numerous access points were the best way to dispose of a body. The left arm, with its distinctive boxing tattoo, was kept as a threat to Holmes so he could be sure it was Smith. According to this version of events, Brady brought the limb to Holmes' house and warned him that if he didn't deliver a generous payday, he would be next. Holmes claimed that he panicked and threw the arm into the water where the tiger shark swallowed it whole. Regardless of how true this story was, investigators concluded that the arm was most likely consumed after being discarded into the ocean. After explaining everything to police, Holmes agreed to testify at the inquest into James Smith's death, which is scheduled for June 12. However, on the morning of the inquest, Reginald Holmes was discovered dead in his car, 3 bullets in his chest. He was parked on Hickson Road beneath the Harbour Bridge, and it has been speculated that Holmes himself ordered a hitman to take him out after taking out a large life insurance policy on himself. If he had died by suicide, the policy would have been null and void, so he used his con artist skills to pull off one last heist for his family. Brady was more likely to have ordered the murder, though other business associates were also accused of the crime in the months that followed. Nonetheless, without Holmes as the star witness, Brady's case quickly unraveled and no conviction was recorded. Brady walked free. Nobody was ever charged in connection with the deaths. Patrick Brady denied any involvement in until his death in 1965 at the age of 76. James Smith was later revealed to be a police informant. His body was never discovered. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took time out of your day to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twisted Mind, and I'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Salamat!